All right, well, I'd like to start with a bit of a confession. It's very fashionable these days to have a confession, and also a declaration of love. The thing is, I love Wikipedia. It's a dangerous habit for a PhD researcher. I had a quick look through my history from the last week, and it turns out that I'd spent some time reading about Goethe, the great German polymath, some time thinking about the baobab trees of Madagascar, and even some time thinking about naan bread. So the reason I could do that is because Wikipedia is absolutely immense. It has 25 million articles now in 285 languages, I think, including Quechua and Tatar and Zazaki. So it's an amazing resource of shared knowledge. And yeah, if you printed it out the way we used to have the Encyclopedia Britannica in hardback volumes, it would stretch in a library longer than a bus. So it's a big resource. And this is a kind of open knowledge. It's Creative Commons licensed. People can copy it and edit it. And open knowledge is really taking off. I mean, Wikipedia is growing fast, but there are also things like open data and open source software, which has been around for a long time, and open access to scientific articles. And it's a really exciting time to be thinking about open knowledge at the moment. The resource is growing fast, and we've recently had in the UK the world's first ever Open Data Institute opened up in London. Okay, so let's go back and think about Wikipedia again. This is the Nepali Wikipedia, and an article about the atmosphere of this planet, the planet Earth. Let's zoom in. So there's the atmosphere of planet Earth. This has something in common. This is also a commons. This is something like the Creative Commons. This is something that we all hold in shared ownership. But unfortunately, the contributions that we're making to this common resource aren't as useful as the contributions that we're making to Wikipedia and other shared knowledge. I used to drive past this station. This is a coal-fired power station in the East Midlands. And this is part of the UK's contribution to the atmosphere. And as we can see, it's been quite detrimental. And with these Creative Commons, we dump our waste in it, we overexploit them as resources, and they are deteriorating. And as we've talked about a lot today, we're facing long-term problems of climate change, of extinction, and other problems of sustainability. So we have two types of commons here. We have the Creative Commons of open knowledge, and we have the natural commons, and they're both faring quite differently from the activity of human beings. So what I'd like to ask is, can this Creative Commons that's doing so well help protect our deteriorating natural commons? And there's a word for this, open sustainability. And yes, I think it can. The thing is, we really need to get smart. And the more that we share information, the more that we share knowledge, the more as a species we can be smart, because there's an awful lot of work to do. We've really got a lot to get done. And in the modern information society, to get stuff done, what you need is information. You need computer code, you need data, you need science. So the more we share that, the more we enable our ability to tackle the challenges of mitigating our effects on the environment and adapting to a changing climate around us. So I'd like to give an example, a first example of how open knowledge can help really advance sustainability. So these days we process a lot of data. There's talk of this thing called big data. People spend a lot of time processing data. So let's ask, how can we process data in a way that is much better for the environment? Well, what it turns out is that what really matters for for processing data, well, we talk about processing data in the cloud, and it's got this lovely sort of ethereal feeling. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, there is a computer out there in a data center that is processing that data. And where that data center is determines the sort of electricity that it's using and how green it is. So on the one hand, you could have a data center in Iceland that's naturally cooled and uses plentiful geothermal energy. Or on the other hand, it could be in Virginia where they've got mountaintop removal coal mining, and that's what feeds into the grid. So it can make a huge difference. So coming back, if we're running our processes in the cloud, how can we make sure that we're using the clean stuff and not the dirty stuff? Well, a startup in London using open data has solved this. Mastodon C have used open data to work out what the energy mix is in different parts of the world. And you can see Iceland there is lovely and green, and you can see Virginia is unfortunately quite dirty. And what they allow you to do is to move your processes around the world to wherever's greenest and wherever's cheapest at the same time. And this is the first example. This is the first key way for me in which open knowledge can really help with sustainability, and that is through making things much more efficient with the resources that we use. If we have shared information, then we have something that we can use to optimize our use of resources like energy and materials. And there are many other ways in which we can create this greater use of resources, the more efficient use of resources. So here's a second example of what open knowledge can do for sustainability. So we've talked a bit about corporations. You know, they definitely have a role in the future, but they are producing a lot of the emissions that we produce. So the question is, how do we help those corporations or persuade those corporations to reduce their emissions? Well, I guess the first step has to be, you have to ask, who's the worst emitters? How much are they emitting? If you haven't got an idea who's emitting what, you can't even start to ask questions. You can't even start to persuade and hold organizations account for what they're doing. Moreover, if corporations start measuring the emissions that they're producing, they have a basis to start reducing them. So a British NGO called the Carbon Disclosure Project, based in London, represent, I think about 82% of the world's biggest corporations release at least some information to the Carbon Disclosure Project on their emissions. And the CDP represent a large number of the world's biggest investors with a mind-boggling $87 trillion worth of capital in their name. So obviously, corporations are worried about where that money goes, where they get their investors, and by disclosing this carbon usage information, there's a basis to start controlling it better. So this is an example of the second key way in which open knowledge can help with sustainability, and that is making our interactions with the natural world much more transparent. How do we make the invisible visible? This is about the impacts and how we reduce those, as we've talked about with the Carbon Disclosure Project, and how do we monitor those. But also, it's about ecosystem services. It's about knowing better what we depend upon for nature so we can value that more. And it's also about things like having a more open environmental science so that we can build up trust in environmental science, which is key for things like climate change. This is another Jack doing another TED, only 3 weeks ago, actually. This guy is a 15-year-old from Maryland, the United States, and sickeningly, he has already, at 15, invented like a carbon nanotube-based test, which allows you to test for pancreatic cancer. And that is 1,000 times more sensitive than the previous one, and 28 times cheaper. So, you know, a major innovation by this clever guy. But what's most interesting for me is that he's made it very, very clear that the reason he could do this was because he had access to quite a few open access papers from the literature, from the scientific literature. Without that, he couldn't even begun to do this at such an early age. So we see how opening knowledge can really help drive innovation. Of course, this is an example from medicine. But in sustainability, we do need innovation. We need new technologies to be developed, and we need them to be brought to market in a way that they can compete with the old technologies at a price that can hopefully displace them. So innovation is key. And that's the third key way that I see in which opening up data and opening up knowledge can really help with sustainability. We can really advance sustainability. So, open sustainability. I see three fantastic opportunities here for these growing pools of open knowledge to make our use of resources, of natural resources, much more efficient, getting much more human value out for much less environmental resources that we have to put in. Also, there's an opportunity, a big opportunity, for much more transparency in how we interact and depend upon and impact the natural world. And then finally, open knowledge can help drive the innovation that we need to see. So there, that's open sustainability. Oh, thank you.